Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Academic Integrity Virtual Town Hall. My name is Lauren Molinex, and I am a practicum student with the Honors and Integrity System here at K-State, and will serve as the moderator for this discussion along with Dr. Camilla Roberts, who is the Honor and Integrity System Director. The purpose of this town hall is to bring together the K-State community to talk about how we can foster and strengthen academic integrity. Joining our panel today will be also Dr. Camilla Roberts, who is the Honor and Integrity System Director, Professor Ray Buell, who is the department head and associate professor for architectural engineering and construction science. Joining us later will be Dr. Rick Zajac, the professor and graduate faculty in the Department of Integrated Studies at Kansas State Polytechnic. Dryden Bram Funk, PhD student in Health and Human Sciences. Michaela Rader, master's student in Geology. Audience members can join our discussion by leaving comments on our Facebook live stream in the comment section. Honor Integrity Director Camilla Roberts will now provide an update on the current state of academic integrity at K-State. Following this update, we will have our panel discussion about the impact of COVID-19 on academic integrity and combating academic dishonesty.
All right, thanks, Lauren. And I just want to go ahead and add this right now that Lauren, as my practicum student this year and this semester, really did a lot of work to get this set up. So I just wanted to publicly thank her as we get started. So first of all, just a little bit about why are we even worried about academic integrity? And for many of you, you might not know the history of the honor and integrity system, and I won't get into a lot of that at this point, but basically the honor and integrity system was designed because students wanted to hold other students accountable. They wanted to make sure that the integrity of the K-State degree was actually worth something. The International Center for Academic Integrity, which I'll talk more about in just a little bit as well, has 6 fundamental values that they say are key to academic integrity. And those values are honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. And so through those values, those are the things that we need to be talking with our students about. We need to be talking with other professors about to help them really understand and also internalize those values. Because if you have those values, most likely that's going to lead to a high level of academic integrity. So just a brief summary of our annual numbers from last year, and this will definitely show a little bit of what's happened in COVID, and I think we'll have some good discussion afterwards of what our students and faculty have definitely seen. So just to go back to August of 2019 to August of 2020, we had 349 Honor Pledge violations reported, and that was 396 students that were in that 324 violations. But I wanted to make mention, especially that the spring and summer semester, so during the COVID times and when we were just starting it, did see a drastic increase of cases. So if we look at just the spring semesters, the spring of 2019 had 238 cases, where the spring of 2020 the spring of 2019 had less than 100 cases, and the spring of 2020 had 238 cases that happened just after spring break, 278 cases total. So almost 3 times the amount of cases just in the spring semester during that time. Also with the summer of 2019, we had less than 5 cases. The summer of 2020, we had right about 25 cases. So summers are normally a little bit slower for us, but we're not really sure why that increase is coming. I mean, there's multiple different ways that we can look at it. One, we can say it's because of moving online and the stress, which research does show that if people are under stress, they don't always make the best decisions. And even with the academic integrity research, it does say that cheating or academic dishonesty does occur more when students are under that stress in their situations. And the spring semester was definitely a very stressful time for everybody. But I also realized that we've been doing some more outreach to a lot of professors and faculty and departments. And so a lot of our faculty members also understand the honor and integrity system more and hopefully are more willing to report. So that can also show an increase. But another another data point that I wanted to mention, that just as of today, on October 22nd, 2020, since the beginning of this semester, we've had 63 cases. If we go back to the fall of 2019, on October 22nd, on 2019, we only had 19 cases. So we're seeing that increase continue, and it didn't just stop after the summer or the spring, but it has continued on. I wanted to talk briefly about some of the recent concerns that we've seen more frequently, especially. The first one is dealing with the helping sites such as Chegg, Course Hero. There are lots of them out there that students are using them not as a helpful manner. They are in-depth copying material, and I think that it's very important that we really emphasize with our students that understanding the material and understanding the assignments is not the same as just looking at it online. Looking at it online is not necessarily teaching them. It's not always teaching them the right thing. Another major thing that we're seeing is students using group chats. Now, group chats such as GroupMe or just larger group messaging, many students do have those within their classes, and that's perfectly fine. It's a great way for students to interact with each other, to be able to ask questions of each other of, hey, when's this due? Or should we get a study group together? But we're seeing more frequently, especially since with the online classes, students are using this to become academically dishonest. They are texting during the exams. They're trying to set up times to take tests together. And so we rely on the students who are being very honest, and they are coming forward, and students are saying, hey, giving to their professor screenshots of these situations, and so we can handle it appropriately. But it's things that we need to think about working with our students and saying the integrity doesn't stop when we've moved online or when things have changed. If you wouldn't have done that same act in the face-to-face exam, then we should think about why would you be doing that during the online exam. So yesterday was actually the International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating, and that was put on by the International Center for Academic Integrity, ICAI. So I'd mention that a little bit more. K-State is an institutional member of ICAI, and I actually currently serve as the president of ICAI. And so I wanted to make sure I mentioned this statement that ICAI released yesterday against contract cheating. And the broad definition of contract cheating is the form of academic dishonesty where students get academic work completed on their behalf, which they then submit for academic credit as if they had created it themselves. So it can be paid for, in many cases it is, or just having somebody else do your work. That is a form of what we would call contract cheating. So in this statement, pretty much condoning or contract cheating, the final paragraphs I actually wanted to read to you because I think there's something that K-State needs to stand up for as well, especially since we are an institutional member. So the final paragraphs say, unfortunately, contract cheating and the market for dishonest online, quote, support appears to be growing, particularly during the current pandemic. Far from being a benign problem, contract cheating has implications for credibility of academic degrees, institutional accreditation, and for society as a whole. As the students who engage in contract cheating graduate, enter the workforce, and move into leadership positions. As an organization dedicated to enhancing academic integrity, ICAI specifically denounces companies that profit from helping students cheat. Moreover, we call upon educational institutions, the corporate world, accrediting bodies, and governments to act to promote academic integrity by setting high expectations for themselves and those around them. So even in that mentions the integrity of the degree really weighs as an important aspect of having this high level of academic integrity. So I'll finish off about what do we do? And we're going to have more conversations with the panelists about what they think we should do and what their ideas are. But the first thing that I would think about with students is that we need to continue to have those conversations. I mentioned those fundamental values, having those conversations, that integrity, again, does not stop when we move online. And with faculty, I think that it's important that we continue to hear more suggestions on what can be done or what has been done as we continue to be either in a hybrid situation or completely online, or even if you're face-to-face, maybe your entire class is not there all the time. And so things are just different at this point. But it's really important for our faculty to really examine and think about, what do you as a faculty member really want your students to learn and know at the end of the semester, or the information that you're teaching them? What do you want them to take away from it? And really figure out if your current assessments, are they really answering that question? Are they the best mechanism to figure out and determine, did my students really learn what I want them to learn? And so sometimes adapting those assessments might deter some academic dishonesty, and it might also enhance that learning that might occur. So I will stop there right now, and I'll turn it back over to Lauren to move on forward with our panel.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Those are all really great points, and I hope that our students are out there listening and our faculty are out there listening. So our first question, and Dr. Roberts touched on this a little bit, but what has been the impact of COVID-19 on academic integrity? And I'll have Professor Buell if you want to kick us off.
You're muted right now. Sorry.
Thank you. So in terms of COVID-19, just listening to the statistics that Dr. Roberts shared with us, I think you can definitely make a case that COVID and having to go online as a result of that has definitely impacted academic integrity. I think maybe what leads to that, as was talked about earlier, the pressure to do well, especially in higher level classes. I think it's also a component of, any cheating is student procrastination, waiting to the last minute to cram for an exam, waiting to the last minute to work on a project that's due, feeling that pressure. I think going online just gives them an additional opportunity to cheat, whereas if they were in a classroom environment, they would probably get caught instantly, whereas if they're sitting at a computer at home, I think they feel a little bit less vulnerable. And I think that probably leads more towards that's why we're seeing the increase in numbers. So that would be my take on it.
I agree that there probably is that kind of internet, that kind of technology divide that we run into. People feel like they can say things on Facebook that they wouldn't say in real life, those sorts of things. But I think at the same time, we have to consider the stress level of students, because this is, although they're stressed, all the time, this is an extremely stressful time for everybody, professors, students included. And I think a lot of them are feeling that stress, and it's pushing them to do things that they wouldn't normally do. Even though they know what they should do, we often resort to maybe the last ditch thing that we can do to get around whatever it is, a test, an assignment. It might not be solely we procrastinated to do it. It's just they're stressed and they don't know what tools can help them. So I guess that's a question that we're going to address later, but I think it's our responsibility to kind of talk to them about those tools and how they can maybe better manage themselves so they aren't getting to that point of stress, that they take that out, if that makes sense.
We normally think about cheating being in the high stakes cases, but I think with COVID and everybody being quarantined, what we've done is lower the bar. And even those low stakes cases now feel more like high stakes cases, because the student is not facing a human teacher anymore. They're facing this cold, harsh browser that's just saying, nope, that's the wrong answer. And they're kind of like, what else can I do? So there's that harsh emotional content where normally they would have friends to talk about and complain with and that kind of stuff to as an outlet to vent. They're feeling more panicked to do this. I also had a question though about faculty. When we went online, I for one increased my vigilance. So I know we're reporting more cases, but I also know that I am checking things out more thoroughly than I was before. So it's natural that I'm going to find more people, more instances of cheating. When they told me I had to start teaching, giving my test online, that the first thing I thought of is, uh-oh, now I'm going to have to make sure to check Course Hero and Chegg and all of that and see if they're being used. So there's a vigilance aspect of it too.
I think you could probably make a case that maybe, I think the cheating has gone up by going virtual, but I think you could also make a case that maybe it's just easier to catch it. And so we're catching cases that maybe before slipped under the radar screen.
I was going to say it's easier to cheat when you're in your PJs. Or feels easier anyway.
I think it's probably that combined factor for sure. The vigilance, because we're all very aware of what resources are out there and that students have the ability to use them now. They can't just look over somebody's shoulder in the exam room. But I think it's also that combined increased stress is also causing increased occurrences.
I agree
I've
with
watched.
the panel completely that it's definitely a combination of the hypersensitivity to the cheating being available and the additional opportunities to cheat without having that proctor or instructor right there in front of them. Cheating has occurred since Plato's Academy back start of time, so it's not like something that's going to change. It's something that is driven by competitiveness in these academic environments. So especially when students are trying to get into medical school, pre-PA, et cetera, and they have this drive to get that little bit higher grade point average, as well as the other end of the spectrum where students are feeling very stressed and they don't have enough time, they haven't managed their time to get things done. Sometimes that drives them to the path of least resistance, which I think is all like accumulation of what's occurring here in the COVID-19 crisis.
Part of me understands the stress aspect of it. I do get that, but then there's also the side of me that says, we've got students who would never dream of cheating just because it's part of their moral makeup. And so I don't want to jump ahead and step on some of the other questions, but I think the one thing I really appreciate about our academic integrity system at K-State, I didn't have much exposure to it until I started sitting on Honor Council. And it was really refreshing to see that it's not a punishment tool, it's an education tool. And so I think we need to educate students that, yes, we understand that you're stressed, but you still have that moral responsibility. And so how can we teach you, how can we reinforce that this is not just a stress issue, but this is an integrity issue for you personally.
And I think that's a great segue into our next question of how do we model compassion and trust in a way that doesn't undermine academic integrity?
So I think we do it by addressing it up front with our students at the very beginning of the semester. We set out our expectations. I think it's more difficult for maybe a first-time instructor who's not been in that situation. They don't know how students cheat, the extreme measures that they can go to cheat. But if you've been through it before, you kind of have the track record and you say, I know you're going to feel these stresses. You're going to experience this among your fellow students. I know that you would never do that, but you're going to see this. And so you kind of set the expectation that we don't want you to cheat. We don't expect you're going to cheat, but some will cheat. And so let me know if you're feeling that stress, what I can do to help you work through that before you get to the point where you feel like you have no other choice.
Yeah, I think the communication lines have to be very open. Again, this touches on another question, but very open between the professors, GTAs, students, because they need to communicate with us when they don't know something so that we can correct something before it goes wrong. Like if your syllabus doesn't explicitly specify that you cannot contact another student on this assignment or this test, students are going to look at that and go, oh, well, so I can do this, even when usually, the expectation would be that they shouldn't. But I think also on our end, we have to provide, specifically during like this time, we need to provide greater flexibility. Basing our grades off of 1 or 2 exams is extremely stressful for students. They have to, take 2 tests and hopefully not fail them. So I think just providing more modalities for success, like if that student's ability is in writing, let's give people a writing opportunity. Yeah, that's not going to be good for everyone, but giving more grades, more quizzes, homeworks, it's more work for us, more work for them, but it gives us more of an opportunity to gauge learning along the way. It's that formative assessment where we can check in and be like, are we getting these topics, or do we need to re-go over something, rather than getting to our final exam and going, well, they didn't get that. So flexibility, I think, is extremely important. And yeah, and then that also goes into like, what are we going to accept in the way of like late assignments, and how are we going to provide notes to students who weren't able to maybe come to what is an in-person class because they were quarantined or because they were sick. Like, flexibility, flexibility, flexibility.
That also falls under compassion for me. There was a really emotional moment for this when none of us were really prepared for COVID. So when it hit, we were all scrambling. And like other teachers, I have tools in my arsenal that I have been honing for years. I have been playing with this assignment to get it just right, or that. And when you put it out there, knowing that everyone's at home now, and now this will probably end up on Chegg, and it will probably end up viral to where it's answered 100 times, and so this assignment will now be dead to me. I'm burning bridges as I'm putting my stuff out there, but you have to put your stuff out there because the students are out there and they're in a pickle, just like I'm in a pickle. So when I read this question about trust and compassion, it's that moment when you realize that this assignment you've spent a week programming might be dead after you put it out there, but you have to put it out there because you've got to trust the students. You've got to give them that opportunity. And even if not all of them pass the trust question, you still have to try. It's being the grown-up.
I agree with that completely. There's going to be times when we have to put forth more effort and work into making sure the students are getting what they need, knowing that this might not work ever again. This is something that just toss it out the window, but that's the compassion part of it. The trust part of that is kind of like we talked about a little bit. We have a hypersensitivity to this is going to happen. They're probably going to be out there, and next time it might get misused elsewhere. So maybe with the trust component of that, that's why we use the Profundus lockdown browsers. That's why we try to activate some of that, which in the beginning, back in March, wasn't available to all classes in all areas. So I think that was another reason why we had some issues. But that fine line of not undermining the academic integrity is important, as I think with the McCabe studies in the 2000s with Duke, which kind of pushed the academic integrity a lot, they showed over 80% of students cared immensely about academic integrity and that they wanted it at the universities. But always finding that wasn't great. They also found that only 18% self-report other students being cheating. So some of that trust is a thing of building. I think being aware of the academic honor pledge is very important here at K-State, and any way that we can include that, being upfront in the classes, talking about it during your syllabus, pointing to the quiz and additional information on the websites will help with this a lot.
I'll add a little bit in there that just I was based upon even a conversation I had earlier today with a woman who is not at K-State, but she is a 100% online professor, has been teaching online for many, many years. But she realizes that being and teaching online is tough. And it's not necessarily just a 5-day-a-week job. It is a lot of times, and putting yourself out there. That's what I would ask for faculty and staff and leaders, of student leaders, to put themselves out there and try to build those relationships, because it's harder. And I think that since everybody has been in lockdown or kind of in their very much smaller groups, that's what people are missing. They're missing the interaction with other people. And so when professors, and I hear this from students, that when professors don't reply to them, or they're not getting back to them, or they're not being available at different times, then it makes it even more difficult for those students. And they want to get to know faculty members. And I think faculty members, for the most part, want to get to know students, but now that they're not always face to face, that makes it a little bit more difficult.
I think in some ways, cheating is like a snowball going down the hill. You know, the more it happens, the more we allow it to happen and go unchecked, the bigger it gets and the bigger problem it gets. And I'll be honest that our department at one time was maybe a little lax, and lax probably isn't the right word, but I think we had the impression that we were scarring these students for life if we ever reported them for anything. And so we kind of tried to self-manage it, but we found out it wasn't working because, you know, you knew who cheated in your classes, and then you would be watching for them in future classes, but you get 5, 10, 20 other faculty member who don't know that that happened. And so we finally just got to the point as a department, we just said, we can't do this. We have to have a policy that we report every single instant. And as the faculty member teaching the class, you set what the punishment's going to be. And so you still have control over how egregious it was and so forth. And so I think that really helped us in a lot of ways to just say, we're not going to tolerate this. And then I think the word gets around fairly quickly.
I think that's a great introduction to another question that I have for you all of how do we illustrate, and Professor Buell touched on it a little bit, but how do we illustrate potential impacts academic dishonesty can have on students and then also the university at large?
Who's being asked the question?
If you would like Professor Zajac to kick us off.
So the biggest thing for me with this, the biggest thing for me was when we started to have tests online, or labs online, I knew that there were people video recording stuff and putting that out there, but that was just asking for trouble when you give hundreds of students an identical video to work off of. And so one of the things I needed to do right from the get-go was use an online system that randomized the questions so that everybody had their own individual question, which to me meant a lot of programming work, a lot of coding in a short time to get it done. But it was really a fundamental need for this to happen. The other way my course, so restructuring my course to where a lot of stuff gets done re-randomized per student was a huge thing. And again, higher vigilance, paying attention to what's going on on Chegg in particular, or Course Hero, or all of those sites.
I think we just need to set really, really clear expectations. I feel like we often put the honor statement on the syllabi and go, hey, that's there, read it, carry on. You know, I think it needs to be reinforced more. You know, after freshman year, nobody points it out. It's just there. What does it mean to follow the honor and integrity system? What does it mean to access on unauthorized aid? We need to be clear about what we expect and then what the consequences are if we don't follow those expectations, because students need to know up front that there's going to be an XF or there's going to be a 0 on this exam if you seek unauthorized aid, and just reiterate that over and over.
I think that's a great point, that it needs to be very clear your expectations for each course, because not every course they take at K-State will be the same. Interpersonal communication between these students is very different in different courses. Some allow them to work on assignments together, but not quizzes or tests, etc. And so making that extremely clear up front, and what your idea of working together is. Can they have almost identical assignments? Do they need to have different graphs, etc. in their lab reports? Things like that, I think we run into a lot. And one way that you can kind of help with that, I know with the COVID model, a lot of classes are hybrid. So you have to build either an in-person section and then an online section. You have to make something fundamentally different between those sections. So students are getting a little bit of something that they can't get in person that they're getting online, maybe a different assessment of what their online lab video was for the lab courses I teach. At least that's something that we try to kind of change and help work out for students.
Michaela just made a comment about that sometimes it's talked about in the freshman year. And so I just wanted to throw this out there just for numbers, something that I didn't cover in my initial kind of summary of the report. But last year, 30% of our cases came from seniors, 32% came from juniors, 23% from sophomores, and only 10% of all the cases came from freshmen. And there's a lot of ways that you can think about it, that once you get your junior and senior years, traditionally those are the classes that are more high stake. They're in their major. They many students think that they count more, which maybe they do because it's really into your major. Or it can be that those are sometimes smaller classes. So it's easier to be vigilant. It's easier to find to see those violations. But this is truly not just a concern for our underclassmen, for our freshmen and our sophomores. I think we often, and I say this to Faculty Senate quite often, that we need to continue the conversation from freshmen all the way to graduate students. And it's amazing how few upper classrooms I'm invited into. I mean, I do a lot of presentations, and I'm willing for anybody who's listening. I'll Zoom in and do presentations. But I very rarely get to make those presentations for those upper level students. Rick, I think you had.
Yeah, so this question was also about the university at large, and you brought something up when you brought in the juniors and the seniors. When we talk about this, about students using online websites, there's really a third player in the party, and that's the people answering the questions are likely, they might well be grad students and seniors at our own institution. So it's not just a limited to the student and the website. There's a third person behind it who knows what they're doing is compromising some other kids, some other students' academic integrity. The other thing, though, is we have a message to get out, and I get that. But I was so unprepared to know that there's another message coming from Chegg, coming from Course Hero, that you need to hear what they're communicating to the students, so you know what the students are hearing. Chegg is not telling the students, hey, come cheat. They're not putting this out as cheating. They're painting this as, here's the magic sword that helps you do the job of defeating your homework. And when the student finds an online resource to help them do their homework, there's a sense of accomplishment there too. So these are the messages that the students are getting. And so when Ray talked about this being not just about punishment, but also about education, this is the message this is the propaganda that we're trying to counter-educate against. I think one of the things we could do that would be really helpful is to let the faculty see what it is that the students are hearing when they go on these sites and are told, no, this is you're smart for doing this.
So Camilla, what would be the ethical and moral implications of intentionally posting false information to Chegg and other sites just to mess with students?
So I'll let you know, there was a case at Princeton University where a TA actually posted his or her own question, then came back in as a different user, answered his or her own question incorrectly with the intent to catch students. Yes, I don't think that's very ethical a way to do that, but unfortunately it is happening. But I always have to laugh a little bit. If you really look at either the paper mill sites, so the ones that people can buy papers on, Chegg, all these other things, they have in very small print, somewhere in there, they always say, you should not turn this in as your own. And that's how they're able to get away with not having lawsuits against them. The US is is behind, I will say, in legislation in the idea of contract cheating in these academic sites. In other areas of the world, the government has said it's illegal, but we don't have a lot of government structure over our academics that some other educational systems have. But it's something that really, I think that as a community, it's very important for our faculty members to really get together and say, this is not appropriate for our students. And so I think one of the concerns is that some students are hearing from some faculty, oh yeah, you can go and look at whatever. And then you have other faculty who are saying, no, this is completely wrong. And so that mixed messages. And so that's what I would call upon faculty, especially in those fields that you do see that more on those Chegg Course Heroes, although I've seen everything from business to health and human services to engineering to physics. I mean, I'm seeing almost everything. That I think that we have to come together and make some sort of statement as a university that this is not going to be appropriate usage of what our students are doing. So.
You're muted, Rick.
There you go.
So one
Now, on the
issue-
other hand, I do admire the Chegg and Course Hero websites for the non-cheating aspect, things that they've taught me. So I mean, it kind of reminds me of remember how Napster used to be the illegal way to download music, but it taught Amazon how to, what people wanted, and now they do it legally. And so I found that when I make myself available to answer students' homework questions with little hints, not like do it for them, but just little hints. When I make myself available to them in the evenings, not 2 o'clock in the afternoon during my official office hours, but when I make myself available when they're there typing their stuff in, Chegg use goes way down, because it's not necessarily the cheating aspect so much as they had no one else. And if I'm there instead, if they've got me instead, Chegg is teaching me that is something I need to find a way to offer. Now, mind you, I can't offer it when they're up at 2 a.m. because my wife would object.
One issue we kind of had to deal with as faculty is I think it's real easy to get wrapped around the axle trying to be so hyper vigilant that you think you have to catch every instance of cheating, and that's never going to happen. And so we finally just kind of came to the decision, we're going to do the absolute best we can. If we see cheating, we're going to call it out, we're going to report it. But in the end, and in some ways, this may be a little bit easier for us because we're so applications based. Everything builds on, one course builds on another. So if they're cheating, they're only screwing themselves because it's going to catch up with them. They're not going to do well on the tests. They're not going to be able to succeed in future courses because they need that fundamental foundational information. And so we really try to do a good job of hammering that home that don't cheat, take the bad grade. You're better off getting help later on to overcome that than cheating, getting caught, and then still being in a situation where you don't have the foundation to be successful.
The new piece with Chegg that still blows my mind is a student is no longer just cheating for themselves when they do something like this. They post a question on Chegg, fine. They just think, okay, I'll get my answer, get my grade, and that's it. But now their answer stays posted there for all of the other students after them. There's a domino effect. And they can't even have that answer pulled off themselves. It has to be the teacher or the faculty member, whatever, who pulls that answer off of Chegg. So they're not just having an impact on themselves. I would argue that the impact they have on their own test grade is small compared to the domino effect they have on all the students going forward after that.
I'd say another thing that could be done when we thinking about how do we say that this is a big deal, is if there's a way that you can tie the academic integrity to the integrity of whatever degree they're trying to get. I mean, it's pretty easy for Professor Buell. I mean, it's construction science. I mean, if you take shortcuts, people's lives are at stake. I mean, and in medicine, that you can kind of do the same thing. And it's just what are the ethical implications when you're actually working with people. I mean, Dryden's working with health and of individuals. And so if his students are taking shortcuts, well, that's not the person I want to be working on my body. And so if we can tie it to something that's bigger than what the university is and bigger than what the students are in right this second. And I think if any students are listening, think about those. What ethical guidelines guide your future profession and build your moral compass toward that?
I really like that point because it made me think, what are the ethical implications of cheating in geology, and then not having the content knowledge or ability in your future job field. Well, geologists go into water. They're important for your water safety and water remediation when it's polluted. They have a large impact on construction sites sometimes, or mining. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, you could be putting all of those miners at risk that are working underneath you. Like, think I think there is an impact for every subject. You just have to think about it.
I know, Michaela, you touched on this earlier, and I think this is a good time to bring this conversation forward. What are some of the steps that we can take to make sure students feel connected and supported in their academic work?
I feel strongly about this because I feel like as a GTA, it's my responsibility to provide the support that my students need, so that they're not resorting to cheating. I have had some issues in the past, and uh, I I don't know why it happened, because I felt like I was providing the support, but I did talk to them about like how I could provide more support, how I could be more available. So I am always available through email. I always make sure to answer emails within 24 hours so that students are getting the questions they need answered, even if they're asking me questions about their assignment that's due the next day, the night beforehand. But I think it's important to provide that support, have clear and open guidelines about what your expectations are. And then if you are a student that is stressed and needs help, there are resources other than your GTAs and professors to help you. We have the Academic Achievement Center, and they have all sorts of helpful tools and academic coaching. About time management, study skills. They can connect you with tutors. Don't resort to cheating. There are tools to help you. And even if you don't want to talk with an academic coach, they even have stuff on their website for, I think, like, there's some schedule planners on like how you can plan out your time better. Some study tools like top 10 things you should do to study for your test. Just as professors and GTAs, be there for your students. As students, seek us out, ask for our help. We want to help.
I'll just echo what Michaela said of just making sure our students know those resources, and because we're a community, and our students are not just taking one class; they're taking multiple classes in multiple departments, possibly in multiple colleges, and I think it's important that we all take responsibility to help our students, and so helping them understand what is available on campus for them, but also going back to what Michaela said as well, answering emails, being that connection. I mean, I was talking with a student today she was pretty frustrated because she couldn't get her advisor to email her back. She wanted some support. She wanted questions about the process she was going through, and she emailed her advisor, and her advisor said, "Well, look online." And then she asked more questions, and so. I'm not saying that everybody at K-State's perfect at all, and I'm not saying that everybody won't reply to students, but I think that it's especially again during this time period when it's just everybody's a little bit more stressed, that we have to go the extra mile sometimes, and reach out to those students. Well, it's a fine balance because our professors and teachers need to take care of themselves too. And everybody needs sleep. Everybody needs to have some time off. And so it's communicating with your students about that as well. That saying, listen, yes, I am available. I will answer your questions. However, if you email me on Sunday night when the assignment's due in 2 hours, I'm probably not going to be able to get back to you. But if you email on a Friday and the assignment's due on Sunday, there's a good chance that I will probably throughout Friday night, Saturday, probably check my email. But communicating that so that students know what those expectations are, because today's society is an immediate gratification society. And students ask something, or anybody asks for something, they get it immediately. They find they need something, they can find it immediately. And so that is what a lot of times I think that our students are kind of wanting or thinking that should occur when it's really not, because of that lack of communication of expectations.
Dr. Roberts, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Communicating expectations is very, very important. But I think the follow-up there is being consistent with your expectations. Don't change your expectations based on students, and try to be as consistent as you can. Like you said, we're not perfect, but if one student hears that, well, so-and-so emailed them the night before and you answered, then it creates a little bit of dysfunction between you and your students. So trying to lay out what you're trying to do for your students and being consistent with it, I found for myself at least, is generally very useful, because the other students, they typically will talk, even in this day and age, they'll talk about you or their other teachers and instructors, and they'll get an idea of what you're trying to do to help them out. And they really appreciate it when you're sticking to your guns, when you give them information off the bat, I feel like.
So I would be interested in maybe hearing from the couple professors on, especially how do you either work with your colleagues and Professor Buell, I mean, you're a department head, so how do you work with the faculty that are with you to help them figure out that balance, to be able to be compassionate and being aware and being accessible to students, but also having their own time and taking their own time? I think there's could be some helpful tips for the faculty watching.
It's definitely a balancing act. I think the biggest part of it, especially with COVID, is just recognizing that this is something that's outside of the student's control. You know, too often the students put themselves in situations that were totally their fault. Like we talked about before, they procrastinate, for whatever reason, but this is something that was totally out of their control. And so when they're feeling stressed over a situation that was forced on them, I think it's a little bit easier to give some leeway and be compassionate. So I think we've probably, I wouldn't say we've gone too far, but I think we've probably gone farther than we normally would, and just being compassionate and saying, you know what, normally under normal circumstances, I wouldn't allow this, but you know what, I'm going to take you at your word, and let's figure this out. And so I think that's probably half the battle.
Dr. Roberts mentioned something about instant gratification, and that actually factors into it for me, because what I teach, I try to tell my students that it's expected, it's even desirable for them to be a little bit frustrated. That's what we want. It isn't really problem solving if it was never a problem to begin with. So finding that balance of what is the comfortable amount of frustration is normal and is desirable, because if the students otherwise think that the moment they're frustrated, oh, I don't get it, run and go find someone who's going to help me with it, or no, it's okay to not have the answer right away, and that's your normal when that happens to you. In fact, you're right in that sweet spot where I want you to be, of figuring something out. I worry that the message doesn't get out, and so the student, as soon as they start to feel that discomfort, think that there's something wrong with them, and that sends them to go look for illicit help.
We have about 10 minutes left in our panel. I want to remind students and reiterate our K-State Honor Pledge. Our honor pledge is, on my honor as a student, I have neither given nor received unauthorized aid on this academic work. I wanted to get that out there just so our students have it fresh in their minds if they're watching our panel. we are going to ask like one last question of our panel. What are things that the Honor Integrity System Office could do to further educate and inform students? And feel free, panelists, to jump in.
I think one thing that would be important, we talked about the progression that we find a greater percentage of those under academic violations in the upper tier, seniors and juniors, and maybe having a annual reminder sent out to them, the quiz that is available to them on the online website, maybe making that something they have to take at enrollment that they need to do just to remind them kind of what's going on. I think it comes back to just being very clear and transparent and letting instructors know as well, reminding us that we have to be very clear and transparent with the students or they won't get it. They'll start questioning. And if we don't answer them in this immediate gratification society we've talked about so much, we don't answer the email in a couple hours, they're going to go find it themselves or do it their way, and they don't really know what the wrong or right answer is. So I think that's something that would be very helpful, just those constant reminders throughout their years here, what's going on, and reiterate, like we said earlier, why does this matter for you now? It's just an assignment, it's just an exam. Well, you take a medical oath to do no harm, and then you're working with a normal, healthy person, of course you're going to try to help them, but it gets even more complicated morally when you're helping maybe a criminal, but they had a gunshot wound and you have to help that person. You always are trying to make those right moral choices. So I think those reminders are always good for everyone.
I don't know the feasibility of it, but what I would very much like is something that is required on a yearly basis for students to do. We have the alcohol, drugs, that thing. What is that called? I'm sorry. You guys know what I'm talking about. That we require for enrollment for the next semester. Why can't we have something similar that enforces these values every year? If it's truly important to the university, which it should be because it is important to the integrity of our degrees and our future work, I think that it should be required and necessary.
Michaela, you had a good point right there when you said it's important for the university. Back in the 2000s, when they were doing the Center for Academic Integrity and the Duke studies in the 2000s, K-State was evaluated here, and over 70% of students said here at K-State that it's very important to them to have academic integrity, because it means something to go to K-State. Their degree meant something coming here. So I do believe that many do find that very important, but sometimes it just falls through the cracks.
As a side note, since Dryden brought it up, through ICAI has redone that entire survey, and it will be actually launched next spring. And so that is one thing that over the next year and a half or so, I would really enjoy being able to administer that survey again at K-State to see, because the main purpose of that survey is to understand what is the academic integrity culture at the institution. And so it would be very informative about what do students think about academic integrity. And so hopefully be looking for that in the future and near future.
Camilla, can you answer this? Does that survey, do they differentiate between theory and practice? Because I think the vast majority of people would say cheating's wrong. No, I wouldn't do it. But then have you ever cheated? It makes a huge difference.
I think they do. And I mean, they already have about 10,000 surveys out just as the pilot. And so they're able to run the reports. And one of the benefits of running it again at this institution is we will be able to compare ourselves with benchmark institutions and kind of see, because that's what everybody wants to know, how do we rank? And so that could be very much beneficial, but they definitely do ask that, well, would you do it? And even how much do you perceive that it's done? And then just as a forewarning that in probably about 5 years now, maybe not even that long, the faculty version of that survey will be revamped and kind of just updated. So in a few years, hopefully I can survey the faculty about what are faculty's perceptions of academic integrity at this institution.
Sometimes I kind of question the honesty, though, of people answering questions on such surveys, because if you're going to be dishonest in your own classroom and your own schoolwork, what's going to encourage you to be honest on a survey about your dishonesty before? I mean, like, I realize it's anonymous, but
And some of those questions are, do you know somebody who has cheated? So it's maybe not necessarily self-reported data, but do you know of something?
Hate to bug out, but I have to get to pre-enrollment. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Well, we have about 4 minutes left. I want to give our panelists opportunity if they have any final thoughts to express them now. Okay, seeing none.
Well, I'll finish up with just thoughts I was going to give panelists if they had anything. I think that overall the information that was shared today really, I mean, it hits home, and I'm always glad that faculty and students, and I mean, these are 2 graduate students and 2 faculty members, support the honor and integrity system. We are a very small office, and I have to rely on members of the Honor Council, previous members of the Honor Council, just supporters of the honor and integrity system to continue spreading the word. And so I greatly appreciate the panelists spending their time doing this.
One point I want to clarify here is that I don't think the intended purpose of any academic integrity system is ever faculty versus students. We are here in a growth environment. We are all trying to grow, gain credibility, be good at what we're trying to do in our majors, and it's not a us versus them or anything like that type of environment. Everyone's there trying to help each other. Sometimes mistakes are made and we grow from those mistakes, and that's what I think it's actually here for, and sometimes think that does get lost. So that's my final word.
Well, a big thank you to all of you for participating in this academic integrity town hall. I hope to have more of these in the future and we continue this first tradition. I think this was wonderful, and I hope our students and faculty got to hear some great information and learned a lot. I know I did. We'd like to invite our panelists and then also any audience watching on Facebook Live to continue this discussion in the comment section of that Facebook post. And that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for participating and being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for organizing this.
yes, thank you.
Thank you.